The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me awake in my Manhattan apartment. My sister Sophia's name flashed on the screen, making my heart skip. She hadn't called me in over a year, not since that disastrous family reunion where everyone had made their opinions about my life choices crystal clear. Emma. Her voice was thin, fragile. I need your help. I sat up, instantly alert. As a pediatric surgeon, I was used to middle-of-the-night emergencies. But this was different. This was family. What's wrong? It's about the baby. She started crying, deep, racking sobs that made it hard to understand her next words. I can't do this anymore. The baby. My nephew Thomas, just 2 months old. The golden grandchild that my parents had been ecstatic about, even though Sophia was barely 22 and single. Because in their eyes, any grandchild was better than no grandchild, and Sophia, despite her youth and instability, was somehow more qualified to be a mother than I was. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already pulling on clothes. Are you at your apartment? Yes, she whispered. Please hurry. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my mind racing back to that family reunion 6 months ago. The day everything had fallen apart. It had been a picture-perfect summer afternoon in our parents' Connecticut backyard. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations, celebrating Dad's retirement from his medical practice. The whole extended family was there, cooing over Sophia's obvious pregnancy while shooting me sidelong glances. When are you going to settle down, Emma? Aunt Patricia had asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're not getting any younger. I'd taken a sip of wine, preparing my standard response about being focused on my career. At 34, I was one of the youngest pediatric cardiac surgeons at New York Presbyterian. I'd saved more children's lives than I could count. But to my family, none of that mattered because I hadn't produced any children of my own. She's too busy playing doctor to think about real life, my mother had chimed in, her voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment. Too career-focused to be a mother. I'm not playing doctor, Mom, I'd corrected her quietly. I am a doctor. A surgeon who saves children's lives. And what about having children of your own? She'd pressed. All those years of education, and what do you have to show for it? An empty apartment and a lot of cancelled dates. I have a fulfilling career, and a career isn't a family, Dad had interrupted. Your sister understands that. Even with her situation, at least she's giving us a grandchild. Sophia had beamed at that, rubbing her pregnant belly while shooting me a smug look. Never mind that she was living in a tiny apartment, working part-time as a waitress with no plan for the future. Never mind that the baby's father had disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant. She was giving them what they wanted, a grandchild, and that made her the better daughter. You know, I'd said, finally losing my patience, it's possible to have both a career and a family. And it's better to wait until you're ready than to bring a child into a situation you can't handle. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia's face had crumpled, and Mom had gasped as if I'd said something truly horrible. How dare you? Dad had growled. Your sister is being brave, choosing to be a mother despite the challenges. What would you know about it? You're too selfish to even consider sacrificing your precious career for a family. Sacrificing my career? I'd stood up, anger finally breaking through years of practiced calm. You mean the career that lets me save children's lives? The one you encouraged me to pursue until you realized it might mean not getting grandchildren on your preferred timeline. That's not fair, Mom had protested. No, what's not fair is treating Sophia's unplanned pregnancy like it's somehow more admirable than my choice to wait until I'm ready for motherhood. What's not fair is acting like the only way to be a good woman is to have babies, regardless of whether you can actually care for them. Sophia had burst into tears, and that was it. I was the villain. The bitter career woman attacking her pregnant sister. Mom had comforted Sophia while Dad ordered me to leave. The rest of the family had watched in silence, their judgment palpable. I hadn't spoken to any of them since, apart from a terse text from Mom announcing Thomas's birth. I'd sent a generous gift, a college fund in his name, but hadn't been invited to meet him. Now, racing through the quiet streets of New York at 3 a.m., I wondered what could have pushed Sophia to call me, of all people. Her apartment building was in a rough part of Brooklyn, the kind of place that made my heart ache as a doctor who knew too well the challenges of raising a child in poverty. The security door was broken, hanging open on its hinges. The elevator was out of order. I took the stairs 2 at a time to the 4th floor. Sophia opened the door before I could knock. She looked terrible, unwashed hair, dark circles under her eyes, wearing what appeared to be the same sweatpants I'd seen her in at the reunion months ago. "He won't stop crying," she said by way of greeting. "I've tried everything. I can't do this anymore." I followed her into the apartment and froze. The place was a disaster, dirty dishes piled in the sink, unwashed baby clothes strewn everywhere, empty takeout containers covering every surface. And in the middle of it all, in a second-hand bassinet, lay my nephew, red-faced and wailing. My doctor's instincts took over. I went straight to Thomas, checking his temperature, his breathing, his skin color. He was running a slight fever but nothing dangerous. Mostly he seemed uncomfortable and overtired. "When was his last feeding?" I asked, already reaching for him. I don't know." Sophia collapsed onto her worn couch. "Everything's a blur. Mom and Dad tried to help at first, but they have their own lives and they said I need to learn to handle things on my own, and I can't." I cradled Thomas against my chest, my surgical hands that had repaired countless tiny hearts now gentle against his small back. He began to quiet almost immediately. "How are you doing that?" Sophia whispered. "He's overtired and probably hungry," I said, moving to the kitchen. "Where's his formula?" "I ran out yesterday. I meant to go to the store, but he was crying and I was so tired." I found an emergency ready-made bottle in my bag. I always carried basic supplies when responding to late-night calls. As Thomas eagerly took the bottle, I really looked at my sister for the first time. She was thin, too thin for someone who'd given birth 2 months ago. Her hands shook slightly, and her eyes had a vacant, desperate look I recognized from my years of dealing with overwhelmed parents. "Sophia," I said gently, "when was the last time you slept?" She started crying again. I don't know anything anymore. Thought I could do this. Everyone said it would come naturally, that maternal instincts would just kick in, but they didn't. I'm a terrible mother." "You're not terrible," I said, meaning it. "You're overwhelmed and undersupported. Where are Mom and Dad?" "They were so excited about being grandparents. They visit sometimes, but they say I need to figure things out on my own. That all new mothers go through this. That I just need to try harder." She laughed bitterly. "Apparently their support only extends to criticizing you for not having babies, not actually helping when the babies arrive." I looked around the apartment again, noting signs I'd missed in my initial focus on Thomas. The past due bills on the counter. The empty refrigerator. The single thin blanket on Sophia's bed. "Have you thought about—" I hesitated, not wanting to spook her. "Have you considered your options?" "You mean adoption?" Her voice cracked. "I've been thinking about it for weeks. But Mom and Dad would never forgive me. And who would even want—" "I would," I said quietly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "If you're considering adoption, I would want him." The silence that followed my offer was broken only by Thomas's contented bottle sounds. Sophia stared at me, her exhausted eyes wide with surprise and something else, hope maybe. "You would," she whispered. But they said you didn't want children. That you were too focused on your career." "They said I wasn't ready," I corrected gently. "There's a difference. I've spent my entire career taking care of children, Sophia. I've wanted to be a mother for years, but I wanted to do it right. To be prepared." "Like I wasn't," she said, fresh tears spilling. "Hey, no." I shifted Thomas to my shoulder, patting his back. "This isn't about judgment. You're dealing with an impossible situation with minimal support. There's no shame in admitting you need help." A small burp from Thomas made us both smile. He snuggled into my neck, finally peaceful. "How do we—" Sophia hesitated. "How would this even work?" "First, we get you some help." I laid Thomas in his bassinet. "There are postpartum support groups, counseling services. Then we talk to a family lawyer about a private adoption. I can have everything arranged within—" My phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Sophia." Mom's voice was sharp when I answered. "Why is your car at Sophia's apartment? What's going on?" Of course. She had tracking apps on everyone's phones. I'd forgotten to disable mine after the reunion. "Sophia needed help with Thomas," I said simply. "We told her she needs to learn independence," Mom snapped. "She'll never grow as a mother if people keep coddling her." We'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Sophia had heard everything, her face was pale with panic. They'll never let this happen, she whispered. They'll say I'm abandoning my baby, that I'm a failure. Listen to me, I took her hands. You're not a failure. You're a young woman making a responsible choice for your child. But if we're going to do this, we have to be united. Can you be strong? She squared her shoulders, a glimpse of determination breaking through her exhaustion. Yes. The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity. I helped Sophia wash her face and change her clothes while explaining the adoption process. We were just finishing when our parents burst in without knocking. What do you think you're doing here? Dad demanded, seeing me holding Thomas. Supporting my sister, I replied calmly. Which is more than I can say for either of you. Mom rushed to Sophia. Sweetheart, are you okay? Is she trying to interfere with your parenting? Actually, Sophia's voice trembled but held firm. Emma's helping me make an important decision. I'm putting Thomas up for adoption. The explosion was immediate. Absolutely not. Dad roared. This is your family. Mom grabbed Sophia's shoulders. You can't just give away our grandchild. She's not giving him away, I cut in. She's choosing to place him with a parent who can provide the life he deserves. Me. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hands dropped from Sophia's shoulders. Dad's face went from red to purple. He finally managed. You think you can just swoop in and take her baby? After rejecting the idea of family for years. I never rejected family, I said, keeping my voice level as Thomas stirred in my arms. I rejected your narrow definition of when and how I should have one. But yes, I want to adopt Thomas. I'm financially stable, I have a support system in place, and most importantly, I'm ready. This is ridiculous, Mom declared. Sophia, you're just tired. Every new mother gets overwhelmed. Remember how excited you were about being a mom. I was excited about the idea of it, Sophia admitted. But the reality, Mom, I'm drowning. I can barely feed myself, let alone a baby. My electricity was cut off last week. I had to choose between diapers and food. We would have helped if you'd asked, Dad protested. Really? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Like you helped, by telling her to tough it out? By tracking her phone but not actually checking on her? By praising her choice to become a mother but providing zero practical support? You have no right, Dad started, but Sophia cut him off. She has every right. My sister's voice was stronger now. Emma's the only one who came when I called. The only one who noticed I wasn't coping. The only one who offered real help instead of just platitudes about maternal instincts and trying harder. Mom sank onto the couch, her face ashen. But what will people say? I don't care anymore, Sophia said. I care about what's best for Thomas. And what's best is being with someone who can actually take care of him. I've already contacted a family lawyer, I added. Everything can be handled privately, legally, and with Thomas's welfare as the priority. This is your fault, Dad pointed at me. You've poisoned her mind against motherhood with your career woman propaganda. No, Dad, Sophia stood up straighter. You did this. You, Mom. You were so excited about having a grandchild that you didn't care if I was ready to be a mother. You pushed and praised and pretended everything was fine, even when it clearly wasn't. But Emma actually saw me. Actually helped. Thomas began to fuss, and I instinctively started swaying, patting his back in the rhythm I'd learned from years of calming frightened children before surgery. He settled immediately, his tiny hand curling around my finger. Mom watched this interaction, something shifting in her expression. You're good with him. Of course she is, Sophia said quietly. She's been taking care of children her whole career. Why did we ever think that made her less qualified to be a mother? The fight seemed to drain out of our parents. Dad slumped against the wall, suddenly looking old. How? Mom's voice cracked. How would this work? Over the next few hours as the sun rose over Brooklyn, we talked. Really talked, perhaps for the first time in years. About Sophia's struggles, about my readiness for motherhood, about our parents' rigid expectations that had hurt both their daughters in different ways. The lawyer arrived at 9, professional and efficient. By noon, the preliminary paperwork was signed. Sophia would retain visitation rights. We all agreed that Thomas should grow up knowing his birth mother's love and bravery. Our parents, after much discussion, accepted their role as grandparents who would support both their daughters through this transition. 2 months later, I stood in Thomas's new nursery in my apartment, watching the sunrise paint the Manhattan skyline in gold. The room was everything I'd dreamed of: warm, safe, filled with books and soft toys and medical equipment discreetly tucked away just in case. My son slept peacefully in his crib, his small chest rising and falling in the perfect rhythm that only a pediatric surgeon-turned-mother would appreciate. Sophia was doing better. With the pressure of motherhood lifted, she'd enrolled in community college, started therapy, begun building the life she actually wanted rather than the one our parents had scripted for her. She visited weekly, her relationship with Thomas evolving into something beautiful and unique. Not quite mother, not quite aunt, but wholly loving. Our parents, well, they were trying. Mom had finally started therapy herself, unpacking her rigid beliefs about motherhood and success. Dad had actually apologized for dismissing my career as somehow incompatible with being a good parent. "You've proved us all wrong," he'd said gruffly, watching me perform my millionth perfect diaper change. "You're a natural at this." "Not a natural, Dad," I'd corrected him. "I'm prepared. There's a difference." The hospital had been surprisingly supportive of my sudden motherhood. They'd adjusted my surgery schedule to allow for more regular hours, and my team had rallied around me with advice and hand-me-downs and emergency babysitting. Turned out other surgeons understood perfectly well that saving children's lives and raising one of your own weren't mutually exclusive. A small sound from the crib drew my attention. Thomas was awake, his eyes, so like Sophia's, blinking up at me trustingly. As I lifted him into my arms, I thought about all the times my family had said I wasn't mother material. How they'd equated career success with maternal failure, never understanding that being a good mother isn't about timing or tradition or meeting other people's expectations. It's about love, yes, but also about wisdom. About knowing when you're ready and when you're not. About being strong enough to make hard choices and brave enough to accept help when it's needed. Sophia had shown that bravery in choosing adoption. I'd shown it in choosing to wait until I was ready. And now, holding my son as the morning light filled his nursery, I finally understood what my grandmother had told me years ago. Family isn't about fitting someone else's mold. It's about knowing your own heart and following it, even when others doubt your path. Thomas cooed, his tiny hand patting my cheek, and I smiled. Sometimes the path to motherhood takes unexpected turns. Sometimes the very people who say you're not family material end up helping you build the family you were always meant to have. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma has perfect timing indeed.